In the misty, cobbled streets of medieval Europe, a shadow loomed over those afflicted with leprosy, a disease that marked its victims with sores and stigma. Known then as Hansen's disease, leprosy was poorly understood, feared as a divine curse or a contagious plague. Those diagnosed were often cast out, their lives reshaped by isolation in leper colonies, remote settlements where the afflicted lived out their days. Picture a quiet countryside, far from bustling towns. Here, leper colonies, or leprosaria, dotted the landscape, often nestled near monasteries or on the edges of forests. These were not just places of exile but small, self-contained worlds. Wooden huts or stone dormitories housed the sick, surrounded by fields they tilled for food. A chapel often stood at the heart, offering solace through prayer. Monks or nuns, moved by charity or duty, tended to the residents, though fear kept many at a distance. Life in a leper colony was slow, governed by routine. The afflicted wore distinctive cloaks or bells, signaling their condition to keep others away. Some colonies had strict rules. Marriage was forbidden, and contact with the outside world was limited. Yet, within these walls, a strange sense of community formed. Residents shared their burdens, worked together, and found meaning in small acts of kindness. Some colonies even thrived, funded by wealthy patrons who saw charity as a path to salvation. The disease itself was mysterious. Leprosy spread slowly, often through prolonged contact, but medieval minds saw it as a moral failing or God's judgment. This fear drove harsh laws. Lepers were sometimes declared dead to society, stripped of rights, and barred from cities. By the 13th century, thousands of leprosaria existed across Europe, over 19,000 by some estimates, stretching from England to Italy. Places like St. Mary Magdalene in Winchester or the Leper Hospital of Harbledown in Kent became refuges for the outcast. As centuries passed, leprosy's grip loosened. By the late Middle Ages, cases dwindled, perhaps due to better diets or the rise of other plagues like the Black Death, which overshadowed leprosy's terror. Many colonies emptied, their walls crumbling into the earth. Yet their legacy lingers in quiet churchyards and place names, whispering of a time when fear and compassion walked hand in hand. Now, as you drift off, imagine those silent colonies, their bells long still, fading into the soft hum of history. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden haze over the rolling hills of medieval Europe, the world grew quiet. In the distance, far from the clamor of market towns and the clatter of carts, stood the leper colonies, forgotten enclaves where time seemed to pause. These were places of shadow and stillness, where those marked by leprosy lived apart, their lives woven into a tapestry of resilience, sorrow, and strange serenity. Let us wander deeper into their world, where the wind carries whispers of a forgotten age. Imagine a colony tucked in a valley, its low stone walls half hidden by ivy. A wooden gate, weathered by rain and years, creaks softly as it swings shut. Beyond it lies a cluster of simple dwellings, huts of timber and thatch, or, in wealthier colonies, sturdy stone buildings with narrow windows. The air smells of earth and wood smoke, mingling with the faint scent of herbs grown for healing salves. A bell tower rises modestly at the center, its chime soft but steady, calling the residents to prayer or marking the hours of their day. This is no prison, though it may feel like one to some. It is a world apart, a place where the afflicted find both exile and belonging. In the 12th and 13th centuries, leprosy was a specter that haunted Europe. The disease, with its creeping sores and numbed limbs, was a mystery to physicians and priests alike. Some believed it was a punishment from God, others a contagion carried on the breath or touch. The truth, unknown then, was that leprosy spread slowly, often requiring years of close contact. But fear outpaced reason, and those diagnosed faced a grim fate. In many towns, a leper's diagnosis was a kind of death sentence, not of the body but of the life they once knew. A ritual, grim and solemn, marked their departure. A priest might sprinkle earth over them, declaring them dead to the world, their possessions seized, their families left behind. Banished from villages, lepers sought refuge in the leprosaria. By the peak of the Middle Ages, these colonies numbered in the thousands, some say as many as 19,000 across Christendom. From the misty moors of England to the sun-baked hills of Provence, they stood as islands of the outcast. In England, the leper hospital of St. James in London or the colony at Harbledown near Canterbury became havens of sorts, funded by nobles or the church, who saw charity as a ladder to heaven. In France, the leprosarium of Saint Lazare in Paris housed hundreds, its walls a silent boundary between the sick and the world. Life within a colony was both harsh and strangely ordered. Each morning, as dawn painted the sky in soft pinks, the residents rose to tend their small plots of land. They grew barley or rye, raised chickens, or wove cloth to sustain themselves. Some colonies had their own mills or bakeries, their rhythms tied to the seasons. Monks or nuns, clad in rough wool, moved among them, offering care or comfort, though always with caution. A leper's clothing was distinct, perhaps a black cloak or a clapper to warn others of their approach. Contact with outsiders was rare, and rules were strict. No marriage, no wandering beyond the colony's bounds. Yet, within these constraints, a quiet community bloomed. Picture a woman named Alina, her hands scarred but steady, kneading dough in a dim kitchen. She had once been a weaver in a bustling town, until the first signs of leprosy appeared, a patch of numbskin, a creeping stiffness. Cast out, she found her way to a leprosarium near York. Here, she learned to tend goats and share stories with others who, like her, carried the weight of their exile. Beside her, an old man named Thomas, his face weathered by both disease and time, carves wooden spoons, his fingers slow but precise. At night, by the flicker of a fire, they and others gather to sing hymns or recount tales of the world beyond, a world they can no longer touch. Not all colonies were bleak. Some, endowed by wealthy patrons, had gardens bursting with roses or orchards heavy with apples. The leprosarium of St. Mary Magdalene in Winchester boasted a library of sorts, where monks copied manuscripts, their quills scratching softly in the candlelight. In wealthier colonies, residents might receive alms, bread, ale, or even a small coin, distributed by caretakers who saw their work as holy. Yet even in these places, the stigma lingered. Visitors were few, and those who came often stood at a distance, their faces masked by fear. As the centuries turned, the tide of leprosy began to ebb. By the 14th century, the disease waned, perhaps because of better nutrition or the rise of other plagues, like the Black Death, which swept through Europe with such ferocity that leprosy seemed a lesser terror. Many colonies stood empty, their walls crumbling into the earth, their gardens reclaimed by weeds. Some were repurposed, hospitals for the poor, almshouses for the elderly. Others vanished entirely, leaving only a name on a map or a weathered stone in a churchyard. Yet, the memory of the leper. As the moon rose over the quiet hills of medieval Europe, its silver light bathed the leper colonies in a soft glow, softening the edges of their isolation. In these secluded enclaves, far from the clamor of city gates and the chatter of market squares, life unfolded at its own unhurried pace. The leprosaria, scattered across the landscape like forgotten stars, were more than places of exile. They were communities where the outcast carved out meaning, where the weight of stigma was balanced by the warmth of shared humanity. Let us step deeper into their world, where the rustle of leaves and the murmur of prayers weave a tapestry of quiet resilience. Picture a leper colony nestled in a gentle valley in southern France, where the air carries the scent of lavender and wood smoke. The year is 1275, and the colony of St. Madeleine sits on the edge of a winding river, its waters glinting under the sun. Low stone walls encircle a cluster of thatched cottages, their roofs sagging like tired shoulders. A small chapel, its wooden cross weathered but proud, stands at the heart of the settlement, its bell tolling softly to mark the hours. Beyond the walls, fields of barley sway in the breeze, tended by hands that bear the marks of leprosy but refuse to falter. In this colony, life is a rhythm of routine and ritual. Each dawn, as the first light creeps over the hills, the residents gather in the chapel for morning prayers. Their voices, some hoarse, some trembling, rise in a hymn that carries both sorrow and hope. Among them is Brother Elias, a monk who chose this life of service after his own brother was sent to a leprosarium years ago. His face is lined, his hands steady as he lights candles or distributes bowls of porridge to the residents. He moves with quiet purpose, his presence a reminder that compassion can bloom even in the shadow of fear. Among the residents is a young woman named Cecile, barely 20, her dark hair tucked beneath a coarse hood. Once a seamstress in a nearby village, she noticed a numbness in her fingers one spring, followed by patches of pale skin. The village priest, his eyes heavy with pity, sent her to St. Madeleine, where she arrived with nothing but a small bundle of cloves and a heart full of fear. Now, months later, she has found a place here, tending the herb garden where mint and chamomile grow in neat rows. Her fingers, though clumsy, crush leaves for salves, their fragrance a small comfort. Beside her, an older man named Guillaume, his face half hidden by scars, tells stories of his days as a peddler, his voice low and steady, lulling the others as they work. The colony is a world of its own, governed by rules both spoken and unspoken. The residents wear cloaks of gray or black, marked with a yellow cross to signal their condition. A wooden clapper or bell hangs at their waists, its jingle a warning to keep outsiders at bay. Contact with the world beyond is rare. Traders leave goods at the gate, and families, if they come at all, stand at a distance, their voices carried by the wind. Marriage is forbidden, and children, though rare, are sent away to be raised elsewhere, a loss that cuts deeper than the disease itself. Yet, within these boundaries, bonds form like roots beneath the soil. Cecile and Guillaume, along with others, share meals of bread and stew, their laughter soft but genuine, a defiance of their exile. The leprosaria of medieval Europe were not all alike. Some, like St. Madeleine, were modest but well-kept, sustained by alms from local lords or the church. Others were grim, their residents left to fend for themselves in crumbling huts. In England, the leper hospital of St. Leonard's in Northampton was a beacon of order, its residents cared for by nuns who saw their work as a sacred calling. In Italy, the leprosarium of San Lazzaro in Venice was a bustling community, its residents crafting goods to trade with nearby towns. Across Europe, these colonies numbered in the thousands, some estimate 19,000 at their peak, each a testament to a society grappling with fear and faith. Leprosy itself was a slow thief, stealing sensation, strength, and sometimes sight. Medieval physicians, armed with little more than herbs and prayers, could offer no cure. Some believed the disease was a mark of sin, others a test of endurance. The truth, hidden from their understanding, was that leprosy, caused by the bacterium Mycobacterium leprae, spread through prolonged contact, not a curse or tainted air. But fear shaped the response more than reason. In some towns, lepers were forced to attend their own funerals, declared dead to the world before being sent to the colonies. Their belongings were burned, their names erased from the rolls of the living. Yet, within the leprosaria, life persisted. Residents wove baskets, mended clothes, or carved wooden tools, their work a quiet rebellion against despair. Some colonies had their own courts, where disputes were settled with a fairness born of shared suffering. Festivals, though rare, brought moments of joy. On St. Lazarus's Day, the patron saint of lepers, the chapel might be adorned with wild flowers, and a feast of roasted apples and fresh bread shared under the open sky. In these moments, The weight of exile lifted, if only for a night. As the 14th century dawned, the shadow of leprosy began to fade. The Black Death, sweeping through Europe with merciless speed, claimed countless lives and shifted attention from the slower scourge of leprosy. Some historians believe better diets or changes in living conditions weakened the disease's hold. One by one, the leprosaria emptied. Some became hospitals for the poor, others almshouses or monasteries. Many simply vanished, their stones scattered by time, their stories buried in the earth. Now, as you sink deeper into rest, imagine the Valley of St. Madeleine, its chapel bell silent under a blanket of stars. Cécile sleeps, her hands folded over a sprig of lavender. Guillaume dreams of the roads he once walked. The colony, like so many others, fades into the mist of history, its walls crumbling but its spirit enduring, a quiet hymn to the strength of those who lived, loved, and found light in the darkest of times. As the first stars blinked awake in the velvet sky above the Valley of St. Madeleine, the leper colony settled into its nightly hush. The river nearby murmured softly, its waters catching the moonlight like a ribbon of silver. Within the low stone walls of the leprosarium, the day's labors, tending fields, grinding grain, weaving cloth, gave way to the quiet rituals of evening. A fire crackled in the common hall, its glow casting shadows on the faces of those gathered, their voices low as they shared stories or whispered prayers. This was a place of exile, yes, but also of stubborn hope, where the outcast found ways to stitch together a life from the threads of what remained. In the heart of the colony, the chapel of St. Madeleine stood as a beacon of solace. Its walls, built from rough-hewn stone, were adorned with faded frescoes of saints, their eyes seeming to watch over the residents with quiet compassion. Each evening, the bell tolled, a soft, mournful sound that called the community to vespers. Brother Elias, the monk who tended the colony, led the prayers, his voice steady as he recited psalms in Latin, the words a familiar comfort to those who understood them and those who did not. Among the worshippers was Cécile, her hood drawn low, her scarred hands clasped tightly as she prayed for strength, not for herself, but for the sister she had left behind in the village. Cécile's days in the colony had settled into a rhythm, though the ache of her old life lingered. She spent her mornings in the herb garden, her fingers brushing against rosemary and sage, their sharp scents grounding her in the present. By afternoon, she joined the other women in the weaving shed, where they spun coarse wool into blankets for the coming winter. The work was slow, her hands less nimble than they once were, but there was a quiet pride in each finished piece. Across the shed, a woman named Margot, her face half hidden by a linen veil, hummed a tune from her childhood in Toulouse. The melody wove through the air, a fragile thread connecting the women to the world they had lost. Guillaume, the old peddler, was a fixture in the colony, his stories a nightly ritual. By the fire, he spoke of distant cities, of Bruges, where canals sparkled like glass, or Florence, where merchants traded silks brighter than a summer sky. His tales were half memory, half dream, but they stirred the hearts of those who listened. A boy named Peter, barely 16, sat close, his eyes wide. Peter had arrived only months ago, sent from a fishing village after a numbness crept into his legs. He clung to Guillaume's stories, imagining a world beyond the colony's walls, a world he might never see again. Life in St. Madeleine was not without its hardships. The disease, relentless and slow, left its mark on every resident. Some, like Margot, bore only faint scars, their symptoms mild for years. Others, like old Tom, a former blacksmith, struggled with hands too gnarled to hold a hammer. The colony's healers, Brother Elias and a widow named Agnes, who had learned the art of herbs before her own diagnosis, did what they could. They brewed teas of willow bark for pain or applied poultices of comfort to sores, but their remedies offered comfort more than cure. The residents knew this, yet they carried on, their days a quiet defiance of despair. Beyond the walls of St. Madeleine, the world of medieval Europe was a tapestry of faith and fear. Leprosy, known as the living death, cast a long shadow. In towns and cities, laws were strict. Lepers were barred from markets, churches, and taverns. Some were forced to carry clappers or bells, their sound a warning to the healthy. In England, the Statute of 1318 declared lepers outlaws in all but name, their property seized, their families forbidden to follow. Yet the Church, torn between fear and charity, poured resources into leprosaria. By the 13th century, thousands of such colonies dotted the continent, over 19,000 by some counts, from the windswept cliffs of Cornwall to the sunlit plains of Castile. St. Madeleine, like many leprosaria, was sustained by alms. A local baron, seeking favor with God, sent barrels of ale and sacks of grain each month. The monks of a nearby abbey gifted parchment and ink, allowing Brother Elias to teach a few residents to read. In return, the colonies sent woven cloth or baskets to the abbey, a small trade that gave the residents purpose. On rare days, a visitor might appear at the gate, a penitent pilgrim or a curious priest, standing at a cautious distance. Once a knight, his armor gleaming, left a purse of coins, his eyes averted as he muttered a prayer for his own soul. The seasons turned, and with them, the colony's life ebbed and flowed. Spring brought bursts of color, wildflowers spilling over the fields, tended by residents who found joy in small acts of creation. Summer meant long days in the sun, harvesting rye or repairing roofs before the rains came. Winter was hardest, the cold seeping into bones already weakened by disease. Yet, even then, the community held fast. On the Feast of St. Madeleine, the chapel glowed with candles, and the residents shared a rare treat, honey cakes baked with spices gifted by a merchant's widow. Laughter filled the hall, soft but bright, a reminder that joy could still find a way. As the 14th century loomed, the world beyond the colony began to change. The Black Death, a shadow far darker than leprosy, swept through Europe, claiming lives with a speed that made the slower disease seem almost merciful. Leprosy cases dwindled, perhaps due to better harvests or shifts in the disease's spread. St. Madeleine grew quieter, its numbers shrinking as fewer arrived at its gates. Some residents, like Tom, passed away, their graves marked by simple stones in the chapel yard. Others, like Cecile, held on, their lives a testament to endurance. In time, the leprosaria faded from the landscape. Some became hospitals, others monasteries or ruins reclaimed by ivy and time. St. Madeleine's walls would one day crumble, its fields returning to the wild. But for now, as the fire dies to embers and the night deepens, the colony sleeps under a blanket of stars. Cecile dreams of her sister's smile, Guillaume of a road untraveled, Peter of a sea he may never sail. Their world, small and shadowed, hums with the quiet strength of those who refuse to be forgotten. As you drift toward sleep, let the gentle toll of the chapel bell fade into the distance, its echo carrying you into the soft embrace of history's embrace. As the autumn leaves whispered their descent onto the paths of St. Madeleine, the leper colony wrapped itself in a blanket of amber and gold. The river, swollen from early rains, gurgled softly beside the stone walls, its melody a constant companion to the residents' quiet days. Within this secluded haven, Far from the harvest festivals of distant villages, life continued its unhurried flow, a tapestry of routines, reflections, and the subtle bonds that formed in the face of shared adversity. The leprosarium was a world suspended in time, where the sting of exile softened into acceptance, and the slow march of days brought both challenge and unexpected grace. In the crisp mornings, the air carried the earthy scent of fallen leaves, and the residents rose with the sun's gentle rise. Cecile, now a familiar figure in the colony, gathered herbs from the garden before the frost could claim them. Her hands, marked by the disease's subtle theft of sensation, moved with care, bundling thyme and fennel into neat sheaves for drying. She had grown accustomed to the numbness, finding ways to adapt, like tying strings around her fingers to hold tools steady. Beside her, Margot worked in silence, her veil fluttering in the breeze, as they prepared remedies for the winter coughs that would soon arrive. Their conversations were sparse but warm, touching on small joys, the flight of a bird overhead or the taste of a ripe pear from the orchard. Guillaume, the storyteller, had taken young Peter under his wing, teaching him the art of carving wood by the fire's glow. Peter's legs, weakened by leprosy, made walking a labor, but his spirit remained unbowed. "See here," Guillaume would say, his voice low and rhythmic, guiding Peter's knife along a branch of oak. "Every tree holds a story in its grain, twists and turns, just like our paths." Peter listened, his eyes distant, dreaming of the sea he had known as a boy. The colony had become his family now, a patchwork of souls drawn together by fate. Old Tom, the blacksmith, though his hands could no longer forge iron, shared tales of his anvil days, his laughter a rumble that warmed the common hall. Brother Elias, ever the steadfast guardian, moved among them like a gentle shadow. He had come to St. Madeleine years ago, drawn by a calling he could not ignore. His own hands were unmarked, but his heart bore the weight of the colony's sorrows. Each day, he tended the chapel, polishing its wooden pews and reciting the hours from a worn book of psalms. Agnes, the herbalist widow, assisted him, her knowledge of plants a gift from a life before her diagnosis. Together, they brewed infusions of elderberry for fevers or willow for aches, their work a quiet ministry. "The Lord provides," Brother Elias would murmur, as they distributed the remedies, his words a balm for weary souls. The leprosaria of medieval Europe were mirrors of the society that birthed them, places where fear met faith in a delicate balance. In the 13th century, as crusades raged in distant lands and cathedrals rose toward the heavens, leprosy spread like a rumor across the continent. Physicians, drawing from ancient texts by Galen or Hippocrates, prescribed baths in mineral springs or diets of viper flesh, but these offered little beyond hope. The Church, seeing leprosy as a divine trial akin to Job's sufferings, established orders dedicated to the afflicted. The Order of St. Lazarus, founded in Jerusalem, spread to Europe, its knights, many lepers themselves, managing colonies with a blend of military discipline and mercy. St. Madeleine reflected this broader world in miniature. Funded by the Baron's alms and occasional gifts from pilgrims on the road to Compostela, the colony hummed with self-sufficiency. Residents mended fences, baked bread in a communal oven, or tended beehives for honey that sweetened their sparse meals. Rules were firm. No one left without permission, and visitors were screened at the gate. Yet, exceptions brought ripples of change. One autumn day, a traveler arrived, a minstrel named Rolf, his lute slung over his shoulder. Standing at a safe distance, he played melodies from the courts of Provence, his songs of lost love and wandering knights drifting over the walls. The residents gathered to listen, their faces lifted, the music a rare bridge to the outside world. As winter's chill deepened, the colony turned inward. Snow dusted the roofs like powdered sugar, and the river froze into a glassy path. Huddled by the fire, the residents shared warmth and stories. Cecile spoke of her village festivals, the bonfires and dances she missed. Margot, usually reserved, revealed her past as a baker's wife, describing the scent of fresh loaves that now existed only in memory. Peter, emboldened, shared his dreams of sailing to far-off ports, his voice cracking with youth's fragile hope. Guillaume wove these threads into grander tales, blending truth with fancy until the line blurred, lulling his listeners toward sleep. Challenges came with the cold. Supplies dwindled, and the disease's toll grew heavier, numb limbs more prone to frostbite, sores slower to heal. Brother Elias rationed the grain, while Agnes's herbs warded off illnesses. One night, a storm howled through the valley, rattling shutters and testing the colony's resolve. Tom, weakened by years of affliction, fell ill, his breath ragged in the dim light. The community gathered around his bed, their prayers a soft chorus, until dawn brought peace. His passing was marked with a simple burial in the chapel yard, a stone etched with his name, a quiet farewell in a world that had already declared him gone. Yet, spring always followed a promise renewed. As the snow melted and buds unfurled, St. Madeline's stirred with life. New residents arrived sporadically, a farmer from the hills, a merchant's daughter, each bringing their own burdens and gifts. The colony endured, a testament to human tenacity. Across Europe, as the 14th century unfolded, leprosy's shadow receded. The Great Famine and the Black Death reshaped the land, drawing focus from the leper's plight. Colonies like St. Madeline gradually emptied, their purposes shifting to house the orphaned or the aged. In the quiet of the valley, as evening falls once more, the residents of St. Madeline rest. Cecile tends a flickering candle, Margot hums a forgotten tune, Peter carves a ship from wood, and Guillaume spins his yarns. Brother Elias closes his book of psalms, thus whispering like leaves. The river flows on, carrying the colony's secrets into the night, a gentle current of history, fading softly into dreams. As you settle deeper into slumber, let the rustle of autumn leaves and the murmur of the river lull you, the stories of St. Madeline blending seamlessly with the hush of your own breath. As spring's tender greens unfurled across the valley of St. Madeline, the leper colony awakened to the soft symphony of renewal. Birds trilled from the budding branches of the orchard, and the river, freed from winter's icy grip, danced over stones with a merry gurgle. Within the stone walls, the residents moved with a quiet optimism, their routines infused with the season's promise. The leprosarium, a haven of exile amid the blooming world, stood as a quiet testament to endurance, where the scars of leprosy were matched by the subtle healing of community and time. Here, in this forgotten corner of medieval France, life bloomed slowly, petal by petal, in the face of adversity. Cecile, now a year into her life at the colony, had become a quiet leader among the women. Her herb garden flourished under her care, rows of lavender and marjoram spilling color and fragrance into the air. She spent her mornings kneeling in the soil, her scarred fingers pressing seeds into the earth with deliberate gentleness. The numbness had spread slightly, a creeping thief that stole a bit more each season, but Cecile adapted with grace. She tied cloths around her tools for better grip, turning limitation into invention. Margot, her companion in the weaving shed, had grown closer, their friendship a soft anchor. Together, they spun yarns, both literal and figurative, sharing whispers of their past lives as the looms clacked rhythmically, a soothing counterpoint to the birdsong outside. Guillaume's stories had become the colony's heartbeat, drawing residents to the common hall each evening. His voice, weathered like old leather, painted pictures of far-off lands, the spice markets of Constantinople, where silks shimmered like rainbows, or the misty highlands of Scotland, where ancient stones whispered secrets. Young Peter, his apprentice in carving, had progressed from simple spoons to intricate figures, a tiny boat, its sails forever unfurled, symbolizing his unquenched dreams of the sea. Peter's legs, though weakened, carried him farther each day, bolstered by Agnes's herbal tonics and the encouragement of his elders. One step at a time, Guillaume would say, his eyes twinkling, and even mountains can be crossed. Brother Elias, the colony's spiritual guide, found his days filled with both duty and quiet joy. He tended the chapel with reverence, sweeping its floors and tending the altar flowers picked from the garden. His sermons, delivered in the soft light of dawn, spoke of redemption, not as a distant miracle, but as the small acts of kindness that bound the community. Agnes, the herbalist, worked at his side, her knowledge expanding as she experimented with new blends, a salve of beeswax and comfort for sores, or a tea of nettle to strengthen the blood. Her own affliction had advanced, leaving her vision blurred, but she navigated the world by touch and scent, her hands sure as they measured roots and leaves. One mild spring afternoon, the colony's routine was gently disrupted by the arrival of new residents, a rare event that stirred a mix of curiosity and compassion. At the gate stood a family of three, a weaver named Henri, his wife Elise, and their young son Luc, barely 10. Henry's hands bore the first telltale patches of leprosy, numb and pale, discovered during a village inspection. The priest had sent them here, their belongings bundled in a cart pulled by a weary donkey. Brother Elias welcomed them with open arms, though at a respectful distance, his voice calm as he explained the rules: separate quarters for the family, work in the fields or sheds, and integration into the daily prayers. Henri, tall and broad-shouldered from years at the loom, gazed at the colony with weary eyes. "We had a home," he murmured, "a shop in the town square." Elise, her face framed by a faded kerchief, held Luc close, her own skin unmarked but her heart heavy with fear for her child. Luc, wide-eyed and silent, clutched a wooden toy horse, a remnant of his old life. The residents gathered at a distance, offering nods and soft words of welcome. Cecile brought a basket of bread and cheese, placing it on the ground for them to take. "You'll find peace here," she said gently, her smile hidden but felt in her tone. Margot added a blanket from the weaving shed, its threads soft and warm. As the newcomers settled, Saint Madeleine absorbed them into its fold. Henri joined the men in the fields, his strength a boon for plowing the earth. Elise, skilled in mending, took to the sewing circle, her needles flashing in the sunlight. Luc, though children were rare in Leprosaria, was allowed to stay under strict watch. He played in the orchard, his laughter a rare, bright note that lifted spirits. Peter, close in age, became his companion, teaching him to carve sticks into whistles. The boy's presence reminded the adults of what they had lost, families, futures, but also sparked a protective tenderness, a shared vow to shield him from the disease's full cruelty. The broader world of medieval Europe, with its cathedrals piercing the sky and kings waging endless wars, cast long shadows over such colonies. Leprosy, often called the unclean sickness, was viewed through a lens of biblical lore, echoing the stories of Naaman or the 10 lepers healed by Christ. Monarchs like England's Henry III endowed Leprosaria with lands and funds, seeing charity as a royal duty. In France, Louis IX, the saintly king, founded hospitals and even washed the feet of lepers, blending piety with politics. Yet, fear persisted. In some regions, lepers were herded into colonies by force, their bells a perpetual mark of shame. By the mid-13th century, the disease peaked, with colonies swelling from Scandinavia's fjords to Sicily's olive groves, each a microcosm of society's contradictions, compassion laced with isolation. Saint Madeleine, modest in scale, mirrored these tensions. Alms arrived sporadically, a wagon of wool from the baron, or barrels of salted fish from the abbey. In return, the residents crafted goods, baskets, cloths, even simple icons carved by Peter and Guillaume for trade at the gate. Festivals marked the calendar. On Easter, the chapel brimmed with wildflowers, and a feast of eggs and greens celebrated resurrection. Brother Elias led a procession around the walls, the residents following with candles, their flames flickering like hopes rekindled. Such moments wove joy into the fabric of exile, reminding all that life, even diminished, held beauty. As summer approached, the valley grew lush, the air heavy with the hum of bees and the scent of ripening fruit. Challenges persisted. The disease's slow advance, a drought that parched the fields, but the community endured. Henry's family adapted, Elise finding solace in prayer, Luke's laughter echoing as he chased butterflies. Cecile, watching from the garden, felt a quiet contentment, her own scars a map of survival. Guillaume's tales grew richer, incorporating the newcomer's stories, blending them into legends of resilience. Yet, times will turned inexorably. As the 14th century crept closer, whispers of change reached even this remote haven. Famines in the north, wars in the east, and a plague brewing in distant lands. Leprosies hold weakened, colonies like St. Madeleine beginning their slow fade. But for now, in the golden light of spring, the leprosarium slumbered peacefully under the stars. Cecile tucked herbs into bundles. Margot hummed at her loom. Peter and Luke. As summer's golden warmth enveloped the valley of St. Madeleine, the leper colony basked in a haze of sunlight and blooming abundance. Wildflowers dotted the fields like scattered jewels, and the river sparkled with lazy ripples, its banks lined with reeds that swayed in the gentle breeze. Within the sturdy stone walls, the residents moved with a measured ease, their days filled with the hum of harvest and the soft rustle of leaves. This leprosarium, a quiet refuge amid the vibrant world outside, stood as a sanctuary of slow rhythms, where the burdens of leprosy were lightened by the shared warmth of companionship and the subtle miracles of everyday life. Here, in this serene pocket of medieval France, hope flickered like sunlight through branches, reminding all that, even in exile, the heart could find its way to bloom. Cecile's herb garden had become a verdant paradise, its rows bursting with sage, rosemary, and chamomile under the relentless sun. She spent her afternoons there, her hood shading her eyes as she watered the plants with a wooden bucket, the cool droplets a brief respite from the heat. The disease had claimed more of her sensation, a faint tingling in her arms now, but Cecile met it with quiet resolve, wrapping her hands in soft cloths to protect them from the sun's bite. Margot, ever her steadfast friend, joined her often, their conversations drifting like the bees among the flowers. "Remember the fairs in Toulouse?" Margot would murmur, her voice soft as she plucked weeds. "The colors, the spices." Cecile would nod, her smile faint but genuine, the memories a gentle balm against the isolation. In the fields, Guillaume and Peter worked side by side, their bond deepening like roots in fertile soil. Guillaume, with his endless tales, had begun incorporating Peter's dreams into his stories, epics of young sailors braving stormy seas, their ships carved from enchanted wood. Peter, his carving skills honing sharper each day, presented Guillaume with a small figurine, an old peddler with a staff, its details etched with care. "For your journeys," Peter said shyly, his weakened legs propped on a stool. Guillaume's eyes misted, his hand clasping the boy's shoulder. "Ah, lad, you've captured the wanderer in me." Their laughter echoed softly across the fields, a melody that lifted the spirits of those nearby. Brother Elias and Agnes formed the colony's quiet core, their partnership a blend of faith and practicality. Elias's chapel services grew more intimate in the summer heat, the doors flung open to catch the breeze as he spoke of parables, the mustard seed growing into a mighty tree, a metaphor for their own resilient lives. Agnes, her vision dimming further, relied on her other senses, her fingers dancing over bundles of dried herbs as she prepared poultices. "The earth gives what we need," she would say, her tone steady, as she applied a cooling salve to a resident's sores. Together, they tended the infirmary, a small hut where the most afflicted rested, their care a silent vow of compassion in a world that had turned away. The new family, Henri, Elise, and young Luc, had woven themselves into the fabric of St. Madeleine, their arrival a subtle shift that brought both vitality and tender challenges. Henry's strength proved invaluable in the orchard, where he climbed ladders to pick ripe pears, his broad hands careful despite the numbness creeping in. Elise, with her nimble fingers, mended clothes and wove baskets, her work precise and beautiful. But the weight of their exile lingered. Nights found Elise weeping softly in their quarters, fearing for Luc's future. The boy, full of boundless energy, roamed the safe confines of the colony, chasing butterflies or helping Peter carve. His innocence was a double-edged gift, sparking joy, yet reminding the adults of vulnerabilities. Brother Elias counseled the family gently, his words like a cool stream. In this place, we are all children of grace, finding our way one day at a time. Subtle tensions arose, as they do in any close-knit world. One sweltering afternoon, a disagreement simmered in the common hall over water rations, the river low from drought, supplies stretched thin. Henri, new to the colony's ways, suggested diverting more for the fields, his voice firm from years as a weaver's head. Old Tom's successor, a quiet farmer named Bertrand, shook his head, his scarred face thoughtful. "We've learned patience here. The rains will come." Cecile mediated, her calm presence diffusing the heat, suggesting a shared prayer for guidance. By evening, the group gathered around Guillaume's fire, the conflict forgotten in the glow of stories and shared bread. Such moments forged deeper bonds, teaching that harmony, like a garden, required tending. The leprosaria of medieval Europe were echoes of a society in flux, where piety and prejudice intertwined like vines on a trellis. In the 13th century, as universities rose in Paris and Bologna, scholars debated leprosy's causes, some blaming bad humors in the blood, others astrological alignments. Treatments varied. In wealthier colonies, residents bathed in thermal springs believed to have healing powers, or consumed concoctions of gold and pearls prescribed by alchemists. The church's influence grew. Popes like Innocent III urged the founding of more leprosaria, viewing them as acts of mercy that mirrored Christ's compassion. Yet, in darker corners, suspicion festered. Rumors of lepers poisoning wells led to pogroms in some regions, driving more afflicted into hiding or distant colonies. St. Madeleine, though humble, felt these ripples. A pilgrim once arrived at the gate, a hooded figure on the road to Santiago, bearing news of the wider world. Crusaders returning from the Holy Land, tales of exotic spices and distant plagues. He left a small relic, a fragment of bone said to be from St. Lazarus, placed reverently in the chapel. The residents gathered to view it, their prayers fervent, hoping for a touch of the miraculous. Festivals provided respite. On Midsummer's Eve, they lit a modest bonfire outside the walls, sharing stories under the stars, the flames dancing like forgotten freedoms. Luc, wide-eyed, tossed herbs into the fire, the smoke carrying wishes heavenward. As autumn's whisper approached, the colony prepared, harvesting apples, drying herbs, mending roofs against the coming chill. Challenges persisted. Elise noticed a faint patch on Luc's arm, a shadow that brought hushed consultations with Agnes. "We'll watch it closely," the herbalist assured, her tone soothing, though worry etched her brow. Yet life flowed on, resilient as the river. Cecile found solace in the garden's bounty, Margot in the loom's rhythm, Peter in his carvings, and Henry's family in the unexpected family they had gained. In the fading light of a summer evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, St. Madeleine settled into peace. Brother Elias rang the vesper bell, its tone soft and lingering. Guillaume began a new tale, his voice weaving dreams. Elise held Luc close, whispering lullabies. The valley, alive with cricket's song, cradled the colony like a gentle hand, its secrets safe in the gathering dusk, a quiet chapter in history's endless scroll. As you sink further into the night's soft folds, let the summer breeze of St. Madeleine carry you, the residents' whispers blending with your breath, guiding you toward tranquil slumber. As autumn's amber veil descended upon the valley of St. Madeleine, the leper colony transformed into a canvas of rustling leaves and harvest gold. The orchard trees bowed heavy with apples, their branches whispering secrets to the cooling wind, while the river flowed with a deeper, more contemplative murmur, carrying fallen petals downstream. Within the enduring stone walls, the residents embraced the season's gentle melancholy, their routines shifting to gather the earth's bounty before winter's hush. This leprosarium, a steadfast enclave amid the fading vibrancy of the world, remained a haven of quiet perseverance, where the marks of leprosy were softened by the harvest's abundance and the deepening ties of kinship. Here, in this tranquil nook of medieval France, time unfolded like a leaf turning, revealing layers of memory, loss, and unspoken strength. Cecile's days in the garden took on a rhythmic harvest pace, her hands bundling the last of the herbs into fragrant sheaves, their scents mingling with the earthy aroma of damp soil. The numbness had advanced subtly, a faint shadow across her shoulders now, but she countered it with deliberate movements, using a sturdy stick to support her as she knelt. Margot, her constant companion, assisted with the drying racks, hanging bundles from the shed's rafters where they swayed like pendulums in the breeze. Their talks grew more introspective under autumn's light, recollections of childhood autumns, with bonfires and chestnut roasts in distant villages. "The leaves fall, but the roots hold," Margot said one afternoon, her voice a soft echo, as they watched a swirl of crimson foliage dance past. Cecile nodded, finding comfort in the words, a reminder that their lives, though uprooted, had taken hold in this shared soil. Guillaume, the eternal storyteller, found autumn's mood a perfect backdrop for his tales, gathering the residents by the common hall's fire as evenings lengthened. His narratives wove in the season's themes, wanderers seeking shelter from storms, harvests that sustained through barren times. Peter, now more adept at carving, contributed his own creations, small leaf-shaped pendants whittled from fallen branches, gifts for the others that symbolized endurance. "Like us," Peter murmured, handing one to Guillaume. "We change color, but don't break." The old peddler's laughter rumbled warmly, his hand patting the boy's back, their bond a quiet anchor amid the colony's ebb and flow. Peter's legs, though still frail, carried him with greater confidence, thanks to Agnes's persistent remedies and the boy's own determination. Brother Elias and Agnes continued their harmonious stewardship, their efforts amplified by the harvest's demands. Elias organized the apple picking, his sermons drawing parallels to the biblical gardens of Eden, places of both beauty and trial, where labor bore fruit. The chapel's altar bloomed with autumn offerings, gourds and sheaves of wheat, symbols of gratitude for the colony's sustenance. Agnes, her dimming sight compensated by heightened touch, prepared preserves and tinctures, her fingers expertly coring fruits or crushing berries into jams that would sweeten the winter months. "Nature's rhythm teaches us patience," she would say, her tone soothing as she distributed jars, each one a small vessel of hope against the coming cold. Their partnership, built on mutual respect, extended to counseling the residents, offering words for weary hearts or salves for aching bodies. Henry's family had fully integrated, their presence infusing St. Madeleine with a familial warmth that softened the edges of exile. Henry's broad frame proved essential in pressing cider from the apples, his laughter booming as the juice flowed sweet and golden. Elise, her mending skills now legendary among the group, repaired cloaks and blankets, her stitches fine despite the faint tremors in her hands. Young Luke, the colony's bright spark, scampered through the leaves, collecting acorns for games with Peter. Yet, the shadow on his arm, a pale patch monitored closely by Agnes, brought hushed concerns. Elise confided in Cecile one twilight, her voice trembling. "He's too young for this burden." Cecile, drawing from her own journey, offered gentle reassurance. "We all carry what comes, but here, we carry it together." The women sat in quiet solidarity, the falling leaves a backdrop to their shared vigil. Autumn brought its own subtle trials, testing the colony's resilience, like wind through branches. A late storm lashed the valley, uprooting a tree near the walls and flooding the lower fields. The residents rallied, Henri and Bertrand repairing the damage with ropes and timber, while the women baled water from the sheds. Brother Elias led a prayer of thanksgiving once the skies cleared, the rainbow arching over the river a sign of renewal. Such events fostered deeper unity, reminding them that adversity, like seasons, passed. Guillaume spun the storm into a legend that night, a tale of a great flood tamed by steadfast souls, his words lulling the group as the fire crackled low. The leprosaria across medieval Europe mirrored these seasonal cycles, embedded in a tapestry of evolving beliefs and practices. In the late 13th century, as trade routes flourished and cities like Venice and London swelled, leprosy's stigma intertwined with emerging medical thought. Herbalists and physicians, influenced by Arabic texts translated in Toledo, experimented with ointments of mercury or arsenic, though results were fleeting. Monarchs and nobles endowed colonies with orchards and vineyards, viewing them as extensions of their piety. King Philip IV of France, for instance, granted lands to leprosaria near Paris, blending charity with control. Yet, in rural havens like St. Madeleine, life remained grounded in simplicity, far from courtly intrigues or the growing whispers of heresy trials that stirred the church. St. Madeleine celebrated autumn's gifts with a modest harvest feast, the common hall adorned with garlands of vines. Tables groaned under bread, cider, and roasted roots, shared in a circle where stories flowed freely. Luke performed a simple dance taught by Peter, his steps light and joyful, drawing smiles even from the weariest faces. Brother Elias blessed the meal, his voice rising in a hymn of thanks, the notes harmonizing with the wind outside. These rituals, small and sincere, wove threads of normalcy into their isolated existence, a quiet rebellion against the world's judgment. As winter's breath began to chill the air, the colony prepared once more, stocking wood, sealing drafts, and turning inward. The patch on Luke's arm remained unchanged, a watchful pause that eased Elise's fears for now. Cecile reflected in her garden, now stripped bare but promising spring's return. Margot hummed old ballads at the loom, Peter dreamed of seas in his carvings, and Henry's family found solace in the routines that had become home. Guillaume's fire burned bright, his tales a bridge to warmer days ahead. In the deepening twilight of the valley, as stars pricked the autumn sky, St. Madeleine rested in gentle repose. The river's murmur blended with the rustle of leaves, a lullaby for the weary. Brother Elias extinguished the chapel candles, their smoke curling like fading memories. The colony, resilient as the turning seasons, slumbered under nature's watchful eye, a serene vignette in the grand, slow scroll of history. As you drift ever deeper into the night's embrace, let the autumn winds of St. Madeleine whisper through your thoughts, the harvest's quiet bounty. As winter's quiet shroud settled over the valley of St. Madeleine, the leper colony transformed into a realm of frost-kissed stillness and muted light. Snowflakes drifted lazily from the gray skies, blanketing the stone walls and thatched roofs in a soft, white hush, while the river slowed to a glassy whisper, its edges fringed with delicate ice. Within this serene enclosure, the residents adapted to the season's embrace, their routines turning inward toward fireside warmth and shared reflections. This leprosarium, a steadfast sanctuary amid the barren beauty of the world, endured as a beacon of subtle resilience, where the grip of leprosy was tempered by the glow of companionship and the slow, comforting rituals of survival. Here, in this peaceful haven of medieval France, the cold invited contemplation, like a blanket drawn close, revealing the quiet strength that lay beneath the surface of every soul. Cecile's garden, now dormant under a layer of snow, became a place of memory rather than labor. She visited it in the pale mornings, brushing frost from the bare stems with gloved hands, her thoughts wandering to springs past and yet to come. The numbness in her shoulders had deepened slightly, a persistent chill that mirrored the weather, but she countered it with woolen wraps and warm infusions brewed from stored herbs. Margot, her loyal friend, joined her in these quiet walks, their breaths forming misty clouds as they spoke of simpler times, autumn gatherings in forgotten villages, where lanterns glowed against the night. Winter strips the world bare. Margot murmured one crisp dawn, her veil dusted with flakes, but it shows us what truly endures. Cecile agreed with a soft nod, their footsteps crunching softly in the snow, a rhythmic lull that echoed the colony's steady heartbeat. By the hearth in the common hall, Guillaume's storytelling sessions grew even more cherished, the fire's crackle a counterpoint to the wind's distant howl. He spun tales suited to the season, legends of wanderers finding shelter in snowbound inns, or ancient kings who discovered wisdom in the silence of winter palaces. Peter, seated close with his carving tools, added his own flourishes. Tiny snowflake ornaments whittled from scraps of wood, hung from the rafters like fragile stars. His legs, braced against a cold's bite, ached more in the damp air, but Agnes's salves provided relief, and Guillaume's encouragement kept his spirits aloft. "Stories are our fire in the dark," Guillaume said, his voice warm and steady, as he passed a carved piece to the boy, their shared craft a bond that warmed more than any flame. Brother Elias and Agnes anchored the colony through the winter's trials, their efforts a harmonious blend of spirit and sustenance. Elias's chapel services took on a cozy intimacy, the space lit by candles that cast golden flickers on the walls, his homilies drawing from tales of saints who persevered through hardships, like Saint Francis embracing the cold as a path to humility. He organized the distribution of stored provisions, ensuring each resident received their share of dried fruits and hearty stews. Agnes, navigating her blurred vision with practiced ease, tended the infirmary with herbal steams and poultices, her hands deft as they mixed cloves and ginger for warming teas. "The body rests in winter, as does the earth," she would whisper to those in her care, her presence a soothing constant, like the steam rising from a pot. Henry's family navigated the season with a mix of adaptation and tender vigilance, their quarters a small island of familial closeness amid the colony's quiet. Henri chopped wood for the fires, his strong arms swinging the axe with care, the rhythmic thuds a steady assurance against the encroaching frost. Elise busied herself with knitting scarves from the last of the wool, her fingers steady despite the faint tremors, wrapping each completed piece around a resident's neck with a gentle word. Young Luke, bundled in layers, played in the snow with Peter, building small forts from drifts or tossing snowballs in innocent glee. The pale patch on his arm remained unchanged, monitored with quiet hope, but winter's ills, a cough here, a chill there, brought moments of worry. Elise confided in Brother Elias during evening prayers, her voice low. "He brings light to this place. May it stay with him." The monk offered solace, his hand raised in blessing, reminding her that grace often hid in the simplest forms. Winter's challenges arrived softly but persistently, like snow accumulating on branches until they bowed. Supplies stretched thin after a heavy snowfall blocked the path to the abbey, delaying alms wagons. The residents rationed carefully, sharing meals in the hall where warmth and conversation conserved both food and spirit. A bout of fever swept through, touching Bertrand and a few others, but Agnes's remedies and Brother Elias's watchful care saw them through, the infirmary filled with the soft hum of prayers and herbal scents. In these times, the community drew closer, Cecile reading from a worn book of psalms, Margot mending by the fire, Peter and Luke sharing whispered games. Guillaume turned the hardships into fables, his tales of survival weaving hope into the long nights, lulling the group toward rest as embers glowed low. The leprosaria of medieval Europe, scattered like quiet sentinels across the land, shared in winter's introspective hush, reflecting a society where faith and fortitude intertwined. In the waning 13th century, as monastic orders expanded and scholastic debates flourished in distant abbeys, leprosy's management evolved slowly, some colonies adopting heated baths inspired by Roman traditions, others relying on charitable endowments from guilds or queens seeking divine favor. Figures like Queen Matilda of England had long since set precedents by founding hospitals, blending royal duty with Christian mercy. Yet, in remote places like St. Madeleine, life remained tied to the land cycles, insulated from the stirrings of trade fairs or papal decrees, where winter enforced a pause for reflection on mortality and redemption. St. Madeleine marked the season with humble observances. On Christmas Eve, the chapel brimmed with evergreen boughs and candlelight, the residents gathering for a midnight vigil where hymns rose softly, their voices blending in harmonious peace. A simple feast followed, oat porridge sweetened with honey, shared in a circle of gratitude. Luke's eyes sparkled at the sight of a carved wooden star from Peter, a gift that symbolized the light piercing the dark. These rituals, unadorned and sincere, fortified the soul against the cold, a quiet affirmation that even in isolation, connection endured. As spring's distant promise whispered on the wind, the colony held fast, the snow beginning to melt in subtle drips. Cecile dreamed of her garden's rebirth, Margot of warmer looms, Peter of sails on imagined seas, and Henry's family of days without shadow. Guillaume's fire burned steadily, his stories a bridge to brighter times. Brother Elias closed the chapel doors each night with a prayer for endurance, the stars above witnessing the colony's quiet vigil. In the valley's wintry embrace, as moonlight gleamed on the snow, St. Madeleine slumbered in tranquil repose. The river's faint trickle harmonized with the wind's sigh, a lullaby for the resting world. The leprosarium, resilient through the seasons, faded softly into the night's gentle fold, a serene whisper in the vast, unfolding narrative of. As spring's soft breath stirred the valley of St. Madeleine, the leper colony awakened from winter's hush into a world reborn in delicate greens and pastel blooms. Snowmelt trickled into the river, its cheerful babble weaving through the air, while tender buds unfurled on the orchard trees, their pink and white petals drifting like whispered promises. Within the weathered stone walls, the residents greeted the season with a quiet reverence, their routines blossoming alongside the earth, tilling soil, mending nets, and sharing stories under the warming sun. This leprosarium, a steadfast haven amid the vibrant renewal of medieval France, stood as a testament to enduring spirit, where the scars of leprosy were softened by the tender shoots of hope and the gentle bonds of community. Here, in this tranquil enclave, spring painted the days with possibility, each new leaf a quiet hymn to resilience. Cecile's garden, once a barren patchwork of frost, now pulsed with life, its rows stirring with the first sprigs of lavender, thyme, and marjoram. She knelt in the soft earth, her hands, numb but steady, guided by muscle memory as she planted seeds saved from autumn's harvest. The disease's slow advance had left her fingers stiffer, but she adapted with knotted cords to secure her grip, turning limitation into quiet ingenuity. Margot joined her, her veil catching the breeze as they worked side by side, their laughter mingling with the hum of bees. "Spring makes even the stones feel alive," Margot said, her voice soft as she pressed a seedling into the soil. Cecile smiled, her eyes tracing the horizon where the valley glowed with promise, their shared labor a grounding ritual that tethered them to the season's renewal. In the fields, Guillaume and Peter prepared the earth for planting, their companionship a steady rhythm against the backdrop of spring's vibrancy. Guillaume's tales took on a lighter tone, stories of travelers finding hidden gardens or sailors discovering islands of eternal bloom. Peter, his carvings growing ever more intricate, crafted a tiny bird from applewood, its wings poised as if ready to soar. "For your stories," he said shyly, handing it to Guillaume, whose weathered face creased with delight. "A fine gift, lad," he replied, his voice warm as the sunlight. "It'll fly in every tale I tell." Peter's legs, though still weakened, felt stronger in the warm air, bolstered by Agnes's tonics and the boy's own quiet determination to meet each day with courage. Brother Elias and Agnes moved through the colony with renewed purpose, their roles as spiritual and practical anchors amplified by spring's demands. Elias led morning prayers in the chapel, its doors flung open to welcome the scent of blossoms, his sermons weaving tales of resurrection, not just of Christ, but of the earth itself, rising from winter's sleep. He organized the sowing of barley and rye, his hands guiding the plow alongside Henry's steady strength. Agnes, her sight now a faint blur, relied on her other senses to tend the infirmary, her fingers sorting herbs by texture and scent, mint for fevers, chamomile for calm. "Spring heals what winter tests," she murmured, her voice a soothing cadence as she distributed salves to those whose sores lingered. Their partnership, rooted in quiet trust, sustained the colony like the river nourished the valley. Henry's family, Henri, Elise, and young Luc, embraced spring's warmth with a mix of gratitude and cautious hope. Henry's work in the fields brought a flush to his cheeks, his broad frame bending to plant seeds with a care that belied his growing numbness. Elise, her nimble hands weaving spring garlands for the chapel, found solace in the rhythm of creation, her fears for Luc eased by the boy's vibrant energy. Luc, now a familiar spark in the colony, darted through the orchard with Peter, their games of chase weaving laughter into the air. The pale patch on his arm, watched closely by Agnes, showed no change, a fragile reprieve that lifted Elise's spirits. "He runs like the wind," she confided to Cecile one evening, her voice soft with wonder, as they watched the boys play. Cecile nodded, her heart warmed by the sight, a reminder that joy could bloom even in shadowed places. Spring's arrival brought gentle ripples of change to St. Madeleine, stirring both hope and subtle challenges. One bright morning, a visitor appeared at the gate, a young monk named Brother Anselm, sent from the nearby abbey to deliver a gift of parchment and candles. His presence, rare and fleeting, sparked curiosity. He stood at a cautious distance, his tonsured head gleaming as he spoke of news from beyond the valley, a new cathedral rising in Chartres, rumors of unrest in distant courts. The residents listened from the gate, their bells silent for once, as Brother Elias accepted the gifts with gratitude. Anselm's visit lingered in their thoughts, a reminder of a world both distant and near, its pulse faintly felt even in their isolation. The leprosaria of medieval Europe, scattered like quiet sentinels across the continent, mirrored spring's theme of rebirth, set against a backdrop of evolving faith and knowledge. In the late 13th century, as pilgrimage routes bustled with travelers seeking relics and redemption, leprosy's stigma persisted, though tempered by growing charity. Orders like the Knights of St. Lazarus expanded, their leper members managing colonies with a blend of discipline and devotion, while wealthy patrons endowed hospitals with vineyards or mills, seeking divine favor through earthly gifts. In England, the leper hospital of St. Julian in St. Albans thrived under royal patronage, while in Italy, colonies near Florence integrated weaving guilds to sustain themselves. Yet, in rural havens like St. Madeleine, life remained tethered to simpler cycles, planting, praying, enduring, insulated from the era's grand debates over theology or trade. St. Madeleine celebrated spring with a quiet festival on the feast of St. George, the chapel adorned with wildflowers and the common hall filled with the scent of fresh bread and cider. The residents gathered in a circle, sharing stories of dragons vanquished, not by swords, but by kindness and perseverance. Luc and Peter performed a small play, waving sticks as mock lances, their laughter drawing smiles from even the weariest faces. Guillaume wove the day's joy into a new tale, his voice a gentle current, a knight who found courage in a hidden valley, guided by a star carved from wood. Brother Elias blessed the gathering, his prayer a soft invocation of renewal, the notes lingering like petals on the breeze. As summer's warmth loomed, the colony prepared, sowing fields, repairing tools, and cherishing the season's light. Challenges persisted. A brief flood from spring rains tested the walls, but the community rallied, their hands united in repair. Cecile found solace in her garden's growth, Margot in the loom's steady hum, Peter in his dreams of flight, and Henry's family in the roots they'd planted here. Guillaume's fire burned each night, his stories a bridge to endless tomorrows. In the valley's tender embrace, as sunlight bathed the blooming fields, St. Madeleine rested in serene harmony. The river's song blended with the rustle of new leaves, a lullaby for the weary soul. Brother Elias closed the chapel doors, the candles' glow fading into dusk. the leprosarium, steadfast through the. As summer's golden embrace wrapped the valley of St. Madeleine in a haze of warmth and light, the leper colony shimmered with the fullness of life. The fields rippled with ripening barley, their golden heads swaying under a boundless blue sky, while the river sang a lively tune, its waters sparkling like molten glass. Within the sturdy stone walls, the residents moved with a quiet vitality, their days filled with the hum of harvest and the soft buzz of bees among wildflowers. This leprosarium, a steadfast sanctuary amid the vibrant pulse of medieval France, stood as a beacon of enduring hope, where the weight of leprosy was lightened by the sun's caress and the deepening bonds of community. Here, in this tranquil haven, summer wove a tapestry of abundance, each day a gentle reminder that even in exile, the heart could find moments of radiant joy. Cecile's garden flourished under the summer sun, its rows bursting with lavender's purple haze and rosemary's sharp green spikes, their scents mingling with the warm earth. She tended it with care, her hands, stiffened by the disease's slow advance, guided by knotted cords and a quiet determination. The numbness had crept further, a faint shadow across her chest now, but she countered it with practical adaptations, a small stool to rest upon, a wide-brimmed hat to shield her from the heat. Margot, her steadfast companion, worked alongside her, weaving baskets to hold the harvest's bounty. Their conversations drifted like the breeze, touching on memories of summer fairs, bright ribbons, jugglers, and the laughter of children long ago. "The sun sees all our scars," Margot said softly one afternoon, her veil fluttering, "but it warms us still." Cecile nodded, her eyes tracing the horizon, where the valley glowed with life, their shared labor a soothing rhythm that anchored them to the season's pulse. In the fields, Guillaume and Peter toiled together, their bond a steady thread in the colony's fabric. Guillaume's stories took on the vibrancy of summer, tales of merchants crossing sunlit deserts or sailors riding waves under endless skies. Peter, his carvings now intricate works of art, crafted a small ship with delicate sails, presenting it to Guillaume with a shy grin. "For your seas," he said, his voice bright despite the ache in his legs, which worsened in the humid air. Guillaume's eyes sparkled as he turned the piece in his hands, his voice warm. "This'll sail through every story, lad." Peter's resilience, bolstered by Agnes's herbal tonics and the old man's encouragement, shone like the sunlight, his dreams of the sea a quiet fire that burned even in the colony's confines. Brother Elias and Agnes remained the colony's quiet pillars, their efforts harmonizing with summer's demands. Elias led prayers in the chapel, its stone walls cool against the heat, his sermons weaving tales of abundance. The loaves and fishes multiplied, a mirror to their own shared harvests. He organized the reaping of crops, his hands steady as he bound sheaves alongside Henri and Bertrand. Agnes, her vision now a mere blur of shapes, moved through the infirmary with practiced grace, her fingers sorting herbs by their familiar textures, mint for cooling drinks, chamomile for soothing nerves. "Summer gives and we receive," she murmured, her tone a gentle cadence as she distributed remedies, her presence a balm for those whose sores flared in the heat. Their partnership, a quiet dance of faith and care, sustained the community like the river fed the fields. Henry's family, Henri, Elise, and young Luc, embraced the season with a blend of gratitude and cautious vigilance. Henry's strength shone in the harvest, his broad frame hauling baskets of grain, his laughter a deep rumble that lifted spirits. Elise, her hands steady despite faint tremors, wove garlands for the chapel and mended nets for fishing, her work a quiet act of devotion. Luc, the colony's spark of youth, darted through the fields with Peter, their games of tag weaving bursts of laughter into the air. The pale patch on his arm, still unchanged, was a fragile hope, checked weekly by Agnes's careful hands. Elise, watching Luc play, confided in Margot one evening by the river, "His joy keeps me whole." Margot, her veil catching the fading light, squeezed her hand gently, their shared silence a testament to the strength found in quiet moments. Summer's abundance brought subtle challenges, testing the colony's unity, like sunlight revealing hidden cracks. A dispute arose over the orchard's yield. Some wanted to trade apples for cloth at the abbey, others to preserve them for winter. Henri, practical from his weaver days, argued for trade, his voice firm. Bertrand, rooted in the colony's cautious ways, urged preservation. Cecile, ever the peacemaker, suggested a compromise, half for trade, half for storage. The group gathered in the common hall, their voices softening as Guillaume spun a tale of a village that thrived by sharing its harvest, his words easing tensions like a summer breeze. By nightfall, agreement was reached, sealed with shared cider under the stars, the colony's harmony restored in the glow of unity. The leprosaria of medieval Europe, scattered like quiet beacons across the land, reflected summer's themes of growth and connection, set against a world of shifting tides. In the late 13th century, as trade routes expanded and Gothic arches soared, leprosy's grip persisted, though softened by growing charity. Pilgrims on the road to Santiago or Canterbury left alms at colony gates, their offerings a blend of piety and fear. Medical treatises, influenced by Islamic scholars like Avicenna, proposed diets of fresh fruits or baths in sulfur springs, but true cures remained elusive. In France, orders like the Sisters of St. Mary Magdalene cared for lepers with devotion, while in England, colonies like St. Giles in London thrived on royal grants, weaving self-sufficiency with dependence. St. Madeleine, modest and rural, lived by simpler means, its residents bound to the land's rhythms, far from the era's theological debates or merchant guilds. St. Madeleine marked summer's peak with a feast on the Assumption of Mary, the chapel adorned with sunflowers and the hall fragrant with roasted fish and fresh bread. The residents gathered in a circle, their faces lit by torchlight, sharing songs and stories. Luke and Peter performed a clumsy dance, their steps drawing laughter that echoed through the valley. Guillaume wove a new tale, a maiden who turned fields to gold with her kindness, his voice a gentle current that lulled the group. Brother Elias blessed the feast, his prayer a soft hymn of gratitude, the words drifting like petals on the river. As autumn's whisper neared, the colony prepared, storing grain, drying fish, and cherishing summer's warmth. Challenges lingered, a brief fever among the elderly, eased by Agnes's care, a damaged fence, mended by Henry's hands. Yet hope bloomed, Luke's health held steady, Cecile's garden thrived, and Peter's carvings grew bolder. Guillaume's fire burned each night, his stories a bridge to cooler days ahead. In the valley's radiant embrace, as starlight bathed the golden fields, St. Madeleine rested in tranquil harmony. The river's song blended with the hum of crickets, a lullaby for the resting world. Brother Elias closed the chapel doors, the candle's glow fading into dusk. As autumn's golden mantle draped itself once more over the valley of St. Madeleine, the leper colony settled into a season of rustling leaves and cooling winds. The orchard trees, heavy with the last apples, cast dappled shadows across the earth, while the river flowed with a steady, contemplative murmur, its surface flecked with crimson and amber petals. Within the weathered stone walls, the residents embraced the season's gentle shift, their days filled with the quiet labor of harvest and the soft glow of fireside gatherings. This leprosarium, a steadfast haven amid the fading splendor of medieval France, stood as a quiet monument to endurance, where the scars of leprosy were softened by the season's bounty and the deepening ties of kinship. Here, in this serene enclave, autumn wove a tapestry of reflection, each falling leaf a gentle whisper of time's passage. Cecile's garden, now a patchwork of fading greens and harvested stalks, became a place of preparation for the winter ahead. She spent her mornings bundling the last of the herbs, lavender for sachets, thyme for healing brews, her hands, stiffened by the disease's slow creep, guided by cords and a quiet resolve. The numbness had reached her upper arms, a subtle weight she countered with woolen wraps and careful pacing. Margot, her ever-present friend, assisted with drying the herbs, their fingers brushing as they hung bundles in the shed, the air thick with earthy scents. Autumn reminds us to gather what matters, Margot said one crisp afternoon, her veil catching a stray leaf. Cecile nodded, her gaze lingering on the valley's fiery hues, their shared work a soothing ritual that tethered them to the season's rhythm. In the fields, Guillaume and Peter prepared the soil for its winter rest, their bond a steady pulse in the colony's heartbeat. Guillaume's stories took on autumn's reflective tone, tales of wanderers finding home in twilight forests or harvests that fed kingdoms through barren winters. Peter, his carving skills now masterful, crafted a small tree from oak, its branches etched with delicate leaves. "For your tales," he said, his voice soft but proud, handing it to Guillaume. The old peddler's eyes crinkled with warmth. "This'll grow in every story, lad," he replied, his hand resting on Peter's shoulder. Despite the ache in his legs, worsened by the damp autumn air, Peter moved with growing confidence, his spirit lifted by Agnes's remedies and the community's encouragement, his dreams of the sea a quiet beacon in his heart. Brother Elias and Agnes remained the colony's gentle anchors, their efforts harmonizing with autumn's demands. Elias led prayers in the chapel, its stone walls adorned with sheaves of wheat and late-blooming asters, his sermons weaving tales of gratitude, the parable of the sower, whose seeds bore fruit through patience and care. He organized the apple harvest, his hands steady as he filled baskets alongside Henri and Bertrand. Agnes, her vision now a faint blur of light and shadow, moved through the infirmary with practiced ease, her fingers sorting herbs by their familiar scents, rosemary for warmth, chamomile for peace. "Autumn teaches us to store hope," she murmured, her tone a gentle lull as she distributed salves to ease the sores that flared in the cooler air. Their partnership, a quiet symphony of faith and healing, sustained the community like the river nourished the valley. Henry's family, Henri, Elise, and young Luc, navigated autumn with a blend of strength and tender vigilance. Henry's broad frame proved invaluable in the orchard, his hands plucking apples with care despite the numbness creeping into his fingers. Elise, her mending skills a gift to the colony, wove blankets from stored wool, her stitches fine even as her tremors grew. Luc, the colony's bright spark, scampered through the leaves with Peter, their games of chase filling the air with laughter. The pale patch on his arm, still unchanged, was a quiet reprieve, monitored by Agnes's watchful care. One evening, as the sun dipped below the hills, Elise confided in Cécile by the river's edge. "His laughter is my harvest." Cécile, her heart warmed, squeezed her hand, their shared silence a testament to the strength found in quiet moments. Autumn's arrival brought subtle tensions, like leaves stirring before a storm. A late harvest left the stores slightly leaner than hoped, sparking murmurs about winter preparations. Bertrand, cautious by nature, suggested rationing early. Henri, practical and bold, proposed trading surplus cider for grain at the Abbey. The debate simmered in the common hall until Cécile, her voice calm as ever, suggested a middle path. Trade a portion, save the rest. Guillaume eased the tension with a tale of a village that thrived by balancing generosity and prudence, his words weaving harmony like a gentle breeze. By nightfall, the group agreed, their unity sealed with shared bread and cider under the starlit sky, the colony's bond stronger for it. The leprosaria of medieval Europe, scattered like quiet stars across the continent, reflected autumn's themes of gathering and reflection, set against a world of shifting tides. In the late 13th century, as merchant guilds grew and pilgrims flocked to holy sites, leprosy's stigma persisted, though softened by acts of charity. Bishops and nobles endowed colonies with lands or mills, seeking divine favor, while orders like the Knights of St. Lazarus managed leprosaria with a blend of devotion and discipline. Medical knowledge, inching forward through translations of Arabic texts, offered remedies like herbal baths or diets of fresh greens, but cures remained elusive. In rural havens like St. Madeleine, life stayed rooted in the land's cycles, far from the era's theological disputes or the clamor of growing cities. St. Madeleine marked autumn with a quiet celebration on the feast of St. Michael, the chapel glowing with candles and adorned with garlands of ivy and late roses. The residents gathered in the hall, sharing a modest feast of roasted apples, bread, and fish stew, their voices rising in soft songs of harvest and hope. Luc and Peter performed a playful skit, wielding sticks as mock swords, their laughter drawing smiles from even the weariest faces. Guillaume wove a new tale, a guardian who protected a valley through the changing seasons, his voice a gentle current that lulled the group. Brother Elias blessed the gathering, his prayer a soft hymn of protection, the words drifting like leaves on the wind. As winter's shadow loomed, the colony prepared, stocking wood, drying fish, and cherishing autumn's fleeting light. Challenges lingered, a brief illness among the elderly, eased by Agnes's care, a damaged roof, mended by Henry's hands. Yet, hope endured. Luke's health held steady, Cecile's garden promised spring's return, and Peter's carvings grew ever bolder. Guillaume's fire burned each night, his stories a bridge to colder days ahead. In the valley's autumnal embrace, as moonlight gilded the falling leaves, St. Madeleine rested in tranquil repose. The river's murmur blended with the rustle of foliage, a lullaby for the weary soul. Brother Elias closed the chapel doors, the candles' glow fading into dusk. The leprosarium, steadfast through the seasons, shimmered softly in the autumn light, a quiet stanza in the timeless poetry of history. As you nestle deeper into the night's gentle cradle, let the falling leaves of St. Madeleine drift through your thoughts, their soft descent guiding you into the warm, enveloping peace of sleep. As spring's delicate breath stirred once more through the valley of St. Madeleine, the leper colony blossomed into a world of soft greens and tender blooms. The snows of winter melted into glistening rivulets, feeding the river that danced with a cheerful gurgle, its banks lined with budding reeds. Orchard trees unfurled pink and white petals, their fragrance drifting like a gentle promise, while wildflowers speckled the fields in bursts of color. Within the weathered stone walls, the residents greeted the season with quiet joy, their routines shifting to sowing seeds and mending tools under the warming sun. This leprosarium, a steadfast haven amid the vibrant renewal of medieval France, stood as a quiet monument to endurance, where the burdens of leprosy were softened by spring's tender embrace and the deepening bonds of community. Here, in this serene enclave, each new sprout whispered of hope, a gentle hymn to life's persistent renewal. Cecile's garden, once a frozen memory, now pulsed with life, its rows stirring with the first green shoots of lavender, thyme, and chamomile. She knelt in the soft earth, her hands, stiffened by the disease's slow advance, guided by knotted cords and a quiet resolve. The numbness had crept further, a faint shadow across her chest and arms, but she adapted with practical ingenuity, a small stool for resting, a cloth-wrapped trowel for digging. Margot, her constant companion, joined her, their fingers brushing as they planted seeds saved from autumn's harvest. "Spring brings the world back," Margot murmured, her veil catching the breeze, her voice soft as the petals falling nearby. Cecile smiled, her eyes tracing the valley's vibrant hues, their shared labor a soothing rhythm that tethered them to the season's promise. In the fields, Guillaume and Peter prepared the earth for planting, their bond a steady thread in the colony's fabric. Guillaume's stories took on spring's hopeful tone, tales of travelers finding hidden meadows or sailors discovering islands of eternal bloom. Peter, his carving skills now a quiet art, crafted a small flower from applewood, its petals delicate and precise. "For your journeys," he said shyly, handing it to Guillaume, whose weathered face creased with warmth. "This'll bloom in every tale, lad," he replied, his voice a gentle current. Peter's legs, though still frail, felt lighter in the warm air, bolstered by Agnes's tonics and his own stubborn dreams of the sea, a beacon that shone even in the colony's confines. Brother Elias and Agnes remained the colony's gentle pillars, their efforts harmonizing with spring's demands. Elias led prayers in the chapel, its doors flung open to welcome the scent of blossoms, his sermons weaving tales of renewal, the seed that dies to bear fruit, a mirror to their own resilient lives. He guided the sowing of barley and rye, his hands steady alongside Henry's strength. Agnes, her vision now a faint blur of light, moved through the infirmary with practiced grace, her fingers sorting herbs by their familiar textures, mint for fevers, chamomile for calm. Spring heals what winter holds, she whispered, her tone soothing as she distributed salves to ease sores that lingered in the damp air. Their partnership, a quiet dance of faith and care, sustained the community like the river fed the fields. Henry's family, Henri, Elise, and young Luc, embraced spring with a blend of gratitude and cautious hope. Henry's broad frame shone in the fields, his hands planting seeds with care despite the numbness creeping further into his fingers. Elise, her nimble hands weaving garlands for the chapel, found solace in the rhythm of creation, her tremors easing in the warm air. Luc, the colony's spark of youth, darted through the orchard with Peter, their games of chase weaving laughter into the air. The pale patch on his arm, still unchanged, was a fragile reprieve, checked weekly by Agnes's gentle hands. One evening, as the sun dipped below the hills, Elise confided in Cecile by the river's edge. "His laughter is our spring." Cecile, her heart warmed, squeezed her hand, their shared silence a testament to the strength found in quiet moments. Spring's arrival brought subtle ripples of change to St. Madeleine, stirring both hope and gentle challenges. One bright morning, a new visitor appeared at the gate, a healer named Sister Clara, sent from a distant convent to share her knowledge of herbal remedies. Her presence, rare and welcome, sparked curiosity. She stood at a cautious distance, her gray robes fluttering as she spoke of new blends, yarrow for wounds, feverfew for aches. Agnes, eager to learn, spent hours with her, their voices blending in quiet exchange as they mixed herbs in the infirmary. The residents watched from afar, their bells silent, as Brother Elias accepted Clara's gift of seeds and a small book of recipes. Her visit, though brief, left a spark of inspiration, a reminder of the world's quiet generosity even toward the outcast. The leprosaria of medieval Europe, scattered like quiet beacons across the continent, mirrored spring's theme of rebirth, set against a world of evolving faith and knowledge. In the late 13th century, as pilgrimage routes bustled and universities flourished, leprosy's stigma persisted, though softened by growing charity. Orders like the Sisters of St. Mary Magdalene expanded, their care blending devotion with practical aid, while wealthy patrons endowed colonies with orchards or mills, seeking divine favor. Medical knowledge, inching forward through translations of Arabic texts, offered remedies like herbal baths or diets of fresh greens, but true cures remained elusive. In rural havens like St. Madeleine, life stayed rooted in the land cycles, far from the era's theological debates or the clamor of growing cities. St. Madeleine celebrated spring with a quiet festival on the Feast of St. John, the chapel glowing with wildflowers and the hall fragrant with fresh bread and cider. The residents gathered in a circle, sharing songs and stories under the soft evening light. Luc and Peter performed a playful skit, waving sticks as mock boats, their laughter drawing smiles from even the weariest faces. Guillaume wove a new tale, a sailor who found a hidden spring that restored the weary, his voice a gentle current that lulled the group. Brother Elias blessed the gathering, his prayer a soft hymn of renewal, the words drifting like petals on the river. As summer's warmth loomed, the colony prepared, sowing fields, repairing nets, and cherishing spring's light. Challenges lingered. A brief flood from spring rains tested the walls, but the community rallied, their hands united in repair. Cecile found solace in her garden's growth, Margot in the loom's steady hum, Peter in his dreams of flight, and Henry's family in the roots they'd planted here. Guillaume's fire burned each night, his stories a bridge to warmer days ahead. In the valley's tender embrace, as sunlight bathed the blooming fields, St. Madeleine rested in serene harmony. The river's song blended with the rustle of new leaves, a lullaby for the resting world. Brother Elias closed the chapel doors, the candles' glow fading into dusk. The leprosarium, steadfast through the seasons, shimmered softly in the spring light, a quiet stanza in the timeless poetry of history. As you nestle deeper into the night's gentle fold, let the blossoms of St. Madeleine drift through your thoughts, their delicate fragrance guiding you into the warm, enveloping peace of sleep. As summer's radiant glow bathed the valley of St. Madeleine in a haze of gold and green, the leper colony shimmered with the fullness of life. The fields swayed with ripening barley, their golden heads nodding under a boundless sky, while the river sparkled with a lively dance, its waters catching the sunlight like scattered gems. Within the weathered stone walls, the residents moved with a quiet vitality, their days filled with the hum of harvest and the soft buzz of bees among wildflowers. This leprosarium, a steadfast sanctuary amid the vibrant pulse of medieval France, stood as a quiet beacon of hope, where the scars of leprosy were softened by the sun's warm caress and the deepening bonds of community. Here, in this serene enclave, summer wove a tapestry of abundance, each day a gentle hymn to the resilience of the human spirit. Cecile's garden flourished under the summer sun, its rows bursting with lavender's purple haze, rosemary's sharp spikes, and chamomile's delicate white blooms, their scents weaving a fragrant symphony in the warm air. She tended it with care, her hands, stiffened by the disease's slow advance, guided by knotted cords and a small stool to ease her work. The numbness had crept further, a faint shadow across her upper arms, but she countered it with practical adaptations. A wide-brimmed hat to shield her from the heat, a cloth-wrapped trowel for digging. Margot, her steadfast companion, wove baskets to hold the garden's bounty, their fingers brushing as they worked side by side. "Summer holds us in its hands," Margot murmured one afternoon, her veil fluttering in the breeze, like a mother cradling her own. Cecile smiled, her eyes tracing the valley's vibrant hues, their shared labor a soothing rhythm that tethered them to the season's pulse. In the fields, Guillaume and Peter toiled together, their bond a steady thread in the colony's fabric. Guillaume's stories took on the vibrancy of summer, tales of merchants crossing sunlit plains or sailors riding waves under endless skies. Peter, his carving skills now a quiet art, crafted a small sun from applewood, its rays etched with delicate precision. "For your tales," he said shyly, handing it to Guillaume, whose weathered face creased with warmth. "This'll shine in every story, lad," he replied, his voice a gentle current. Peter's legs, though still frail, felt lighter in the warm air, bolstered by Agnes's tonics and his dreams of the sea, a beacon that burned bright even in the colony's confines. Brother Elias and Agnes remained the colony's gentle pillars, their efforts harmonizing with summer's demands. Elias led prayers in the chapel, its doors flung open to welcome the scent of wildflowers, his sermons weaving tales of abundance, the loaves and fishes multiplied, a mirror to their own shared harvests. He guided the reaping of crops, his hands steady as he bound sheaves alongside Henri and Bertrand. Agnes, her vision now a mere blur of shapes, moved through the infirmary with practiced grace, her fingers sorting herbs by their familiar textures, mint for cooling drinks, chamomile for soothing nerves. "Summer gives and we receive," she whispered, her tone a gentle lull as she distributed salves to ease sores that flared in the heat. Their partnership, a quiet dance of faith and care, sustained the community like the river fed the fields. Henry's family, Henri, Elise, and young Luc, embraced summer with a blend of gratitude and cautious hope. Henry's broad frame shone in the harvest, his hands hauling baskets of grain with care despite the numbness creeping into his fingers. Elise, her nimble hands weaving garlands for the chapel, found solace in the rhythm of creation, her tremors easing in the warm air. Luc, the colony's spark of youth, darted through the fields with Peter, their games of tag weaving laughter into the air. The pale patch on his arm, still unchanged, was a fragile reprieve, checked weekly by Agnes's gentle hands. One evening, as the sun dipped below the hills, Elise confided in Margot by the river's edge. "His joy is our sunlight." Margot, her veil catching the fading light, squeezed her hand, their shared silence a testament to the strength found in quiet moments. Summer's abundance brought subtle challenges, like sunlight revealing hidden cracks. A dispute arose over the orchard's yield. Some, like Bertrand, wanted to preserve apples for winter, while Henri, practical from his weaver days, argued for trading surplus for cloth at the abbey. The debates simmered in the common hall until Cecile, her voice calm as ever, suggested a compromise, half for storage, half for trade. Guillaume eased the tension with a tale of a village that thrived by balancing generosity and foresight, his words weaving harmony like a summer breeze. By nightfall, the group agreed, their unity sealed with shared cider under the starlit sky, the colony's bond stronger for it. The leprosaria of medieval Europe, scattered like quiet beacons across the continent, mirrored summer's themes of growth and connection, set against a world of shifting tides. In the late 13th century, as trade routes expanded and Gothic arches soared, leprosy's stigma persisted, though softened by growing charity. Pilgrims on the road to Santiago or Canterbury left alms at colony gates, their offerings a blend of piety and fear. Medical knowledge, inching forward through translations of Arabic texts, proposed remedies like herbal baths or diets of fresh fruits, but true cures remained elusive. In France, orders like the Sisters of St. Mary Magdalene cared for lepers with devotion, while in England, colonies like St. Giles in London thrived on royal grants. St. Madeleine, modest and rural, lived by simpler means, its residents bound to the land's rhythms, far from the era's theological disputes or merchant guilds. St. Madeleine marked summer's peak with a feast on the Assumption of Mary, the chapel glowing with sunflowers and the hall fragrant with roasted fish and fresh bread. The residents gathered in a circle, their faces lit by torchlight, sharing songs and stories. Luke and Peter performed a clumsy dance, their steps drawing laughter that echoed through the valley. Guillaume wove a new tale, a maiden who turned fields to gold with her kindness, his voice a gentle current that lulled the group. Brother Elias blessed the feast, his prayer a soft hymn of gratitude, the words drifting like petals on the river. As autumn's whisper neared, the colony prepared, storing grain, drying fish, and cherishing summer's warmth. Challenges lingered, a brief fever among the elderly, eased by Agnes's care, a damaged fence, mended by Henry's hands. Yet hope bloomed, Luke's health held steady, Cecile's garden thrived, and Peter's carvings grew bolder. Guillaume's fire burned each night, his stories a bridge to cooler days ahead. In the valley's radiant embrace, as starlight bathed the golden fields, St. Madeleine rested in tranquil harmony. The river's song blended with the hum of crickets, a lullaby for the resting world. Brother Elias closed the chapel doors, the candles' glow fading into dusk. The leprosarium, steadfast through the seasons, shimmered softly in the summer light, a quiet verse in the timeless poetry of history. As you nestle deeper into the night's gentle fold, let the warmth of St. Madeleine's summer wrap your thoughts, its radiant abundance guiding you into the soft, enveloping peace of sleep. As autumn's golden cloak settled once again over the valley of St. Madeleine, the leper colony glowed with the warm hues of a fading summer. Crimson and amber leaves drifted from the orchard trees, carpeting the earth in a rustling tapestry, while the river murmured softly, its surface reflecting the fiery colors of the season. Within the weathered stone walls, the residents embraced the season's gentle melancholy, their days filled with the quiet labor of gathering the harvest and the soft warmth of fireside gatherings. This leprosarium, a steadfast sanctuary amid the fleeting splendor of medieval France, stood as a quiet testament to resilience, where the scars of leprosy were softened by the season's bounty and the deepening bonds of community. Here, in this serene enclave, autumn whispered of time's gentle passage, each falling leaf a quiet note in the symphony of endurance. Cecile's garden, now a patchwork of fading greens and harvested stalks, became a place of preparation for the winter ahead. She spent her mornings bundling the last herbs, lavender for sachets, thyme for healing brews, her hands, stiffened by the disease's slow creep, guided by knotted cords and a small stool to ease her work. The numbness had deepened slightly, a faint shadow across her upper arms and chest, but she countered it with woolen wraps and careful pacing. Margot, her constant companion, assisted with drying the herbs, their fingers brushing as they hung bundles in the shed, the air thick with earthy scents. Autumn gathers what summer sows, Margot murmured one crisp afternoon, her veil catching a stray leaf. Cecile nodded, her gaze lingering on the valley's vibrant hues, their shared labor a soothing rhythm that tethered them to the season's reflective pulse. In the fields, Guillaume and Peter prepared the soil for its winter rest, their bond a steady thread in the colony's fabric. Guillaume's stories took on autumn's introspective tone, tales of wanderers finding solace in twilight forests or harvests that sustained villages through barren winters. Peter, his carving skills now a quiet art, crafted a small leaf from oak, its veins etched with delicate precision. "For your tales," he said shyly, handing it to Guillaume, whose weathered face creased with warmth. "This'll fall in every story, lad," he replied, his voice a gentle current. Peter's legs, aching in the damp autumn air, found relief in Agnes's salves, and his dreams of the sea remained a beacon, glowing even in the colony's quiet confines. Brother Elias and Agnes remained the colony's gentle pillars, their efforts harmonizing with autumn's demands. Elias led prayers in the chapel, its walls adorned with sheaves of wheat and late-blooming asters, his sermons weaving tales of gratitude, the parable of the sower, whose seeds bore fruit through patience and care. He organized the apple harvest, his hands steady as he filled baskets alongside Henri and Bertrand. Agnes, her vision now a faint blur of light, moved through the infirmary with practiced grace, her fingers sorting herbs by their familiar scents, rosemary for warmth, chamomile for peace. "Autumn teaches us to hold tight to hope," she whispered, her tone a gentle lull as she distributed salves to ease sores that flared in the cooler air. Their partnership, a quiet symphony of faith and care, sustained the community like the river nourished the valley. Henry's family, Henri, Elise, and young Luc, navigated autumn with a blend of resilience and tender vigilance. Henry's broad frame proved invaluable in the orchard, his hands plucking apples with care despite the numbness creeping further into his fingers. Elise, her nimble hands weaving blankets from stored wool, found solace in the rhythm of creation, her stitches fine even as her tremors grew. Luc, the colony's spark of youth, scampered through the leaves with Peter, their games of chase filling the air with laughter. The pale patch on his arm, still unchanged, was a fragile reprieve, checked weekly by Agnes's gentle hands. One evening, as the sun dipped below the hills, Elise confided in Cecile by the river's edge. "His laughter is our harvest." Cecile, her heart warmed, squeezed her hand, their shared silence a testament to the strength found in quiet moments. Autumn's arrival brought subtle challenges, like leaves stirring before a storm. A late harvest left the stores slightly leaner than hoped, sparking murmurs about winter preparations. Bertrand, cautious by nature, suggested rationing early. Henri, practical and bold, proposed trading surplus cider for grain at the Abbey. The debate simmered in the common hall until Cecile, her voice calm as ever, suggested a middle path. Trade a portion, save the rest. Guillaume eased the tension with a tale of a village that thrived by balancing generosity and prudence, his words weaving harmony like an autumn breeze. By nightfall, the group agreed, their unity sealed with shared bread and cider under the starlit sky, the colony's bond stronger for it. The leprosaria of medieval Europe, scattered like quiet stars across the continent, reflected autumn's themes of gathering and reflection, set against a world of shifting tides. In the late 13th century, as merchant guilds grew and pilgrims flocked to holy sites, leprosy's stigma persisted, though softened by acts of charity. Bishops and nobles endowed colonies with lands or mills, seeking divine favor, while orders like the Knights of St. Lazarus managed leprosaria with a blend of devotion and discipline. Medical knowledge, inching forward through translations of Arabic texts, offered remedies like herbal baths or diets of fresh greens, but cures remained elusive. In rural havens like St. Madeleine, life stayed rooted in the land's cycles, far from the era's theological disputes or the clamor of growing cities. St. Madeleine marked autumn with a quiet celebration on the feast of St. Francis, the chapel glowing with candles and adorned with garlands of ivy and late roses. The residents gathered in the hall, sharing a modest feast of roasted apples, bread, and fish stew, their voices rising in soft songs of harvest and hope. Luke and Peter performed a playful skit, wielding sticks as mock staffs, their laughter drawing smiles from even the weariest faces. Guillaume wove a new tale, a wanderer who found peace in a hidden valley, his voice a gentle current that lulled the group. Brother Elias blessed the gathering, his prayer a soft hymn of simplicity, the words drifting like leaves on the wind. As winter's shadow loomed, the colony prepared, stocking wood, drying fish, and cherishing autumn's fleeting light. Challenges lingered, a brief illness among the elderly, eased by Agnes's care, a damaged roof, mended by Henry's hands. Yet, hope endured, Luke's health held steady, Cecile's garden promised spring's return, and Peter's carvings grew ever bolder. Guillaume's fire burned each night, his stories a bridge to colder days ahead. In the valley's autumnal embrace, as moonlight gilded the falling leaves, St. Madeleine rested in tranquil repose. The river's murmur blended with the rustle of foliage, a lullaby for the weary soul. Brother Elias closed the chapel doors, the candles' glow fading into dusk. The leprosarium, steadfast through the seasons, shimmered softly in the autumn light, a quiet stanza in the timeless poetry of history. As you nestle deeper into the night's gentle cradle, let the falling leaves of St. Madeleine drift through your thoughts, their soft descent guiding you into the warm, enveloping peace of sleep. Winter's frosty mantle settled once again over the valley of St. Madeleine. The leper colony cloaked itself in a world of soft snow and hushed stillness. A delicate frost traced patterns on the stone walls, and the thatched roofs bore a blanket of white, muffling the world's sounds. The river, its flow slowed to a crystalline murmur, gleamed with icy edges under a pale, wintry sky. Within this serene enclave, the residents turned inward, their days filled with the gentle crackle of fires and the shared comfort of stories told in the flickering light. This leprosarium, a steadfast sanctuary amid the barren beauty of medieval France, stood as a quiet testament to resilience, where the burdens of leprosy were softened by the glow of kinship and the slow, comforting rituals of survival. Here, in this tranquil haven, winter wove a tapestry of introspection, each snowflake a fleeting whisper of endurance in the face of time's quiet passage. Cecile's garden lay dormant beneath a shroud of snow, its rows of herbs now mere memories under the frost, but she visited it each morning, her boots crunching softly as she traced the outlines of her spring hopes. The disease's slow advance had deepened the numbness in her arms, a cold weight that mirrored the season, but she countered it with woolen shawls and warm teas brewed from autumn stores. Margot, her steadfast friend, joined her in these quiet walks, their breaths forming misty clouds as they spoke of winters past, snowy evenings by hearths long gone, now distant echoes in their hearts. Winter wraps us in silence, Margot murmured one gray dawn, her veil dusted with flakes, but it holds us close. Cecile nodded, her gaze lingering on the valley's frozen beauty, their shared steps a soothing rhythm that tethered them to the season's calm. In the common hall, Guillaume's storytelling sessions became the heart of winter's evenings, the fire's glow casting dancing shadows as his voice wove tales of perseverance, wayfarers finding refuge in snowbound caves or villages warmed by shared hearths through endless nights. Peter, seated close with his carving tools, crafted small snowflakes from scraps of wood, their delicate patterns hung from the rafters like frozen dreams. His legs, aching in the damp cold, found relief in Agnes's salves, and his spirits soared with Guillaume's encouragement. "Stories are our warmth in the dark," Guillaume said, his voice warm as he accepted a carved star from Peter. "This'll light every tale, lad." Peter's smile, bright despite his weariness, was a spark that warmed the room, his dreams of the sea a quiet beacon in the winter's gloom. Brother Elias and Agnes remained the colony's gentle anchors, their efforts a steady rhythm against winter's challenges. Elias led prayers in the chapel, its walls adorned with evergreen boughs, their scent mingling with candle smoke as he spoke of light enduring through darkness. the star over Bethlehem guiding weary travelers. He organized the rationing of stores, ensuring each resident received their share of porridge and dried fish. Agnes, her vision now a faint blur of shapes, tended the infirmary with practiced hands, mixing herbs for warming tonics, ginger for circulation, chamomile for calm. Winter tests, but it binds us, she whispered, her tones soothing as she applied salves to sores worsened by the cold. Their partnership, a quiet symphony of faith and care, sustained the community like the fire warmed the hall. Henry's family, Henri, Elise, and young Luke, navigated winter with a blend of resilience and tender care. Henry's strength shone in chopping wood, his axe swing steady despite the numbness creeping deeper into his hands, the thud of each strike a reassuring pulse. Elise, her fingers trembling slightly, knitted scarves and mittens, wrapping them around Luke and others with quiet affection. Luke, the colony's spark of youth, built snow figures with Peter, their laughter echoing through the valley like a melody. The pale patch on his arm, still unchanged, was a fragile hope, checked weekly by Agnes's gentle hands. One snowy evening, Elise confided in Brother Elias by the chapel's glow. "His joy is our fire." Elias, his voice soft, offered a prayer for strength, his words a gentle balm for her worried heart. Winter's trials arrived softly but persistently, like snow piling on branches until they bowed. A heavy snowfall sealed the valley, delaying alms from the abbey and thinning supplies. The residents rallied, sharing meals in the hall where warmth and stories stretched meager rations. A fever touched a few, including old Bertrand, but Agnes's remedies and Elias's prayers saw them through, the infirmary a haven of soft murmurs and herbal scents. Cecile read psalms by candlelight, Margot mended by the fire, and Peter and Luke whispered games, their voices weaving a cocoon of comfort. Guillaume turned the hardships into fables, a tale of a village that thrived through a frozen winter by sharing a single flame, his words lulling the group as embers glowed low. The leprosaria of medieval Europe, scattered like silent beacons across the continent, mirrored winter's introspective hush, reflecting a society where faith and fear intertwined. In the late 13th century, as cathedrals rose and trade routes flourished, leprosy's management evolved slowly, some colonies adopting heated baths inspired by Roman practices, others sustained by endowments from nobles seeking salvation. The Church, wielding both compassion and control, urged charity. Figures like Saint Elizabeth of Hungary, who tended lepers herself, inspired orders to care for the afflicted. Yet, suspicion lingered. Rumors of lepers as outcasts fueled occasional violence, driving more into remote havens like St. Madeleine, where life remained tied to the land's quiet cycles. St. Madeleine marked winter with a humble Christmas vigil, the chapel aglow with candles and evergreen, the residents gathering for hymns that rose softly into the frosty air. A modest feast followed, porridge sweetened with honey, shared in a circle of gratitude. Luke and Peter gifted small carvings to the group, their wooden stars and snowflakes passed hand to hand, drawing smiles from weary faces. Guillaume wove a tale of a star that guided lost souls to warmth, his voice a gentle current that lulled the group. Brother Elias blessed the gathering, his prayer a soft invocation of light, the words drifting like snowflakes on the wind. As spring's distant promise whispered through the valley, the colony held fast, the snow melting in slow drips. Cecile dreamed of her garden's rebirth, Margot of warmer looms, Peter of sails on imagined seas, and Henry's family of days without shadow. Guillaume's fire burned steadily, his stories a bridge to brighter times. In the valley's wintry embrace, as moonlight gleamed on the snow, St. Madeleine rested in tranquil repose. The river's faint trickle blended with the wind's sigh, a lullaby for the weary soul. Brother Elias closed the chapel doors, the candles' glow fading into dusk. The leprosarium, steadfast through the seasons, shimmered softly in the winter light, a quiet verse in the timeless song of history. As you sink deeper into the night's gentle cradle, let the snows of St. Madeleine blanket your thoughts, their quiet fall guiding you into the warm, enveloping peace of sleep.